It happened on a cold October night in 1995, just outside of Dover, England. A man named Thomas Hargreaves was driving down a deserted country road, heading home after a long shift at work. The road was quiet, the kind of eerie stillness that made the world feel empty. The only sounds were the hum of his engine and the occasional rustling of leaves in the wind. Then, out of nowhere, he saw him. A man stepped directly into the road, not walking from the side, not emerging from the trees, but as if he had simply materialized out of the darkness. Thomas slammed the brakes, his tires screeching on the damp pavement. His heart pounded as the car skidded to a stop, inches away from the man. But the figure didn't flinch. He just stood there, motionless, staring. Thomas immediately got out, his pulse still racing. "Are you all right?" he called out. The man was dressed in an old-fashioned suit, the kind you'd see in photos from the early 1900s. A dark coat, polished shoes, and a bowler hat tilted slightly on his head. His face was pale, his eyes hollow and distant, like someone trying to recall a long-forgotten memory. Where am I?" the man finally whispered. His voice was thin, like he hadn't spoken in years. Thomas, still shaken, took a cautious step closer. "You're in Dover. Are you lost?" The man's eyes widened in absolute confusion. "Dover," he repeated, as if the word meant nothing to him. No, I was just in London. I was just walking home to my wife." A cold chill ran through Thomas. London? That was over 80 miles away. No one could just appear in the middle of a rural road in the dead of night. Not like this. The man looked down at his own hands, turning them over, as if seeing them for the first time. His breathing became shallow, panicked. "What year is it?" he suddenly asked. Thomas hesitated. "It's 1995. The man took a step back. No, that can't be right. It's 1923. Silence. Just the wind howling through the trees. Thomas felt an overwhelming sense of wrongness in the air, as if reality itself had cracked open for just a moment. The man looked around in horror, his fingers clutching his coat, as if it were the only thing grounding him. And then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he vanished. One blink, one breath. Gone. Thomas stumbled back against his car, his skin crawling. The road was completely empty again, as if the man had never existed. But the strangest part, his car's hood was still warm, as if it had just been stopped by a real solid body. Police investigated, but found no trace of the man. No footprints. No reports of missing persons matching his description. It was as if he had stepped through time itself, just for a moment, before being pulled back into the unknown. To this day, Thomas never forgot the look in the man's eyes, a mixture of fear, confusion, and something even worse. Recognition, as if he had seen something on that road just before disappearing. Something none of us were meant to see. It started with a knock, not the usual polite kind, not even the urgent, panicked rapping of a visitor in distress. No, this knock was slow, deliberate, heavy. Knock, knock, knock. I sat up in bed, the weight of sleep still clinging to me. My phone screen glowed 2:33 a.m. Who the hell would be knocking at this hour? I hesitated. Maybe I imagined it. Then it came again, louder this time. Knock, knock, knock. A cold unease curled around my spine. I lived alone at the very end of a desolate, wooded street. My nearest neighbor was nearly a mile away. No one should be here. I reached for my phone and checked the security cameras. The front porch was empty. The motion sensors hadn't triggered. But then, just as I was about to put my phone down, the door handle jiggled. Every hair on my body stood on end. Someone was trying to get in. My heart slammed against my ribs as I slowly crept toward the door. I didn't turn the light on. I didn't make a sound. Pressing my ear against the wood, I held my breath. Silence. I swallowed hard, then peered through the peephole. Nothing, just the porch, bathed in dim moonlight. The trees beyond swayed in the cold night air. I exhaled, half relieved, half unnerved. Maybe some kid playing a prank, or a stray animal. Then, as I turned to walk away, knock, knock, knock. I froze. The sound was coming from the back door. I spun around, my blood turning to ice. Someone had moved, fast. And now, they were knocking from the rear entrance of my house. I checked my phone again. The backyard camera feed loaded, but glitched out into static. A cold realization settled over me. This wasn't someone messing with me. This was something else. Something that didn't want to be seen. The knock came again, louder this time. I grabbed the baseball bat from beside my couch, and against every ounce of my better judgment, I crept toward the back door. The doorknob twisted, turned, but the deadbolt held. I felt my breath quicken. My hands shook around the bat. Then, in the silence, I heard it. A voice, whispering, low, inhuman, distorted, as if struggling to mimic speech. Let me in. I went completely still. It was my voice. The thing at my door was imitating me. A surge of dread rooted me to the spot. My pulse pounded in my ears. I forced myself to look through the glass pane of the back door. At first, I saw nothing, then two pale skeletal hands pressed against the glass. Fingers too long, skin too stretched, the knuckles bent at unnatural angles. And then, a face emerged from the darkness, not human, not even close. It had no lips, no nose, just empty, hollow sockets where its eyes should have been. But I felt it watching me. Then, in that same sick, twisted mockery of my own voice, it rasped, "Let me in." I did the only thing I could. I stumbled back, grabbed my phone, and called the police. They arrived 15 minutes later. Too long. By then, the knocking had stopped. The whispers had faded. And when the officers searched my property, they found nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, no evidence that anything had been there at all. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know that whatever was knocking that night, it'll come back. And next time, it won't ask to be let in. It'll just come inside. In 2018, a group of hikers set out to explore the Great Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. They were experienced, equipped with GPS, maps, and years of backcountry knowledge. Their plan was simple: a 3-day trek along a well-known trail, camping along the way. But on the second night, everything changed. As the sun dipped behind the trees and the deep blue of twilight settled in, they stumbled upon something that shouldn't have been there. A house. It sat in a small clearing, old, weathered, and wrong. The structure looked ancient: rotting wood, a sagging roof, glassless windows staring like empty eyes. The oddest thing, it wasn't marked on any of their maps. They had studied the area extensively, and there were no known structures for miles. Must be an abandoned cabin, one of them muttered. But something about it made them hesitate. Still, curiosity won. They approached carefully, stepping over wild, overgrown grass that hadn't been disturbed in years. The air was deathly still, not even the usual sounds of the forest. One of them knocked on the warped wooden door. No answer. He pushed it open. Inside, the cabin was frozen in time. Dust coated everything, but the furniture was still arranged as if someone had left expecting to return. A table sat in the center, 4 chairs neatly tucked in. An old iron stove rested against the far wall. Faded photographs hung on the walls, portraits of people in Victorian-era clothing. But it was the bedroom that unsettled them the most. A mirror stood in the corner, and the moment they entered, they noticed something was off. In the dim light, their reflections looked wrong. The room was the same, but their reflections seemed slower. A half-second delay, as if the glass was hesitating to mimic their movements. One of them, a woman named Carla, stepped closer. She raised her hand. Her reflection didn't move immediately. Then it smiled. But Carla wasn't smiling. She screamed and stumbled back, knocking over an old wooden chair. The others turned, seeing nothing but their own reflections, until they didn't. Their reflections were still there, standing, watching, but they weren't moving anymore. That was enough. They bolted from the house, sprinting into the darkening woods, their heavy breaths filling the silent air. They didn't stop until they reached their campsite, hearts pounding, skin crawling. But when they turned back toward the way they came, the house was gone. No clearing, no structure, nothing. Just dense, untouched forest. Confused and terrified, They pulled out their GPS. Their coordinates matched exactly where the house had been, but now it was as if it had never existed. Shaken, they packed up and left at first light. Days later, one of them, a man named Eric, did some research. He found an old legend about a family that disappeared in those mountains in the 1800s. The story went that a house had been built deep in the forest, but after a harsh winter, travelers found it abandoned. The family was never found, but strange reflections had been reported in the area ever since. Some say the family is still trapped in the mirror, caught between worlds, waiting for someone to take their place. And Carla, she refuses to look into mirrors anymore because sometimes, just sometimes, she swears she sees something else staring back. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in your nightmares.